Welcome back to the podcast, From Opinion to Insight, discovering answers to important questions from a historical perspective. Today, we're embarking on a journey back in time, delving deep into the Middle Ages.
And to guide us on this fascinating exploration, we have a really rich stack of material here. Chronicles, yes, but also insights from art, philosophy, even economic records. This kind of comprehensive approach lets us really see how different forces, often thousands of miles apart, were, deeply intertwined.
Definitely, and how seemingly distant events could have these profound, long-lasting consequences. When we talk about the Middle Ages, I think many people still default to that old idea of a dark age, stagnant, backward.
Right, that persistent image. But what's truly fascinating when you dive into the sources, as we have here, is the sheer dynamism of this era. New ideas forging, intense cultural exchange happening.
And this remarkable clash and convergence of different civilizations, it was anything but stagnant.
Exactly. It was a period of incredible innovation and transformation. It gave birth to concepts and structures that, well, still define our world in many ways.
Okay, so to really understand this dynamic era, we have to travel back, maybe to an unexpected place for some listeners. Our story begins around the year 570 CE, with the birth of a man named Muhammad. A seemingly quiet start, but one that would ignite a transformation sweeping across continents.
And Mecca, before Islam, was anything but quiet. It was a vibrant, incredibly strategic trade hub. Think crossroads of ancient caravan routes connecting the Roman and Byzantine empires with India, China.
So a real economic powerhouse already.
Absolutely. And home to the powerful Quraysh tribe. They basically ran the city, managed its affairs, and benefited hugely from this trade. But it wasn't just about money. Mecca was also a major polytheistic center. The Kaaba, that cube-shaped structure, housed over 300 god images.
300? Wow.
Yeah, including the prominent moon god Hubal. And these religious pilgrimages were a huge source of income for the city, boosting its economy, cementing its regional importance. This whole setup, the existing power, the wealth, the polytheistic belief system, that's the crucial context for the radical shift that was about to happen.
A shift that would challenge
the established order, the economic interests tied to those old gods. Everything.
And that shift begins, you said, around 610 CE.
Exactly. Muhammad, who is a respected merchant himself, experienced this profound spiritual revelation in the cave of Hira. It was there, according to Islamic tradition, through the angel Gabriel, or Jibril, that he received the divine will of Allah, the one God, a message proclaiming strict monotheism.
A radical departure from the 300 gods in the Kaaba.
Totally radical. This message emphasized submission to this one God, a new social order based on justice and compassion. And it was later compiled into the Quran, the holy book of Islam. And these surahs provide incredibly comprehensive guidance, everything from legal principles, moral conduct, to the foundational pillars of Islam like fasting during Ramadan, the Hajj or pilgrimage to Mecca.
So Muhammad starts preaching this new message. How is it received?
Well, he rapidly gained followers, people who resonated with this message of monotheism, social justice. But he also faced significant opposition, intense opposition, sometimes violent.
From the establishment, the Quraysh tribe.
Exactly. As we mentioned, they saw their power, their wealth, their whole polytheistic tradition directly threatened by this new doctrine. It undermined their entire system. This mounting pressure, this hostility, led to a pivotal event in 622 CE, the Hijra.
The migration from Mecca to Medina.
Yes, but it wasn't just a physical move. It was a profound turning point. A true migration that reshaped the faith and its community entirely.
Okay, so Muhammad establishes this community in Medina. Then, following his death in 632 CE, what happens?
His followers form the Ummah, this vast, rapidly expanding global community of Muslims, but they immediately face a critical question. Succession. Who leads now?
The prophet is gone, so who takes over?
Right. They chose a new leader, the Caliph. envisioned as the successor to Muhammad, responsible for guiding both the spiritual and the temporal, the political affairs of the community.
Seems straightforward enough.
But it wasn't. This very question of succession immediately led to a lasting division. A division that, remarkably, still resonates today in global politics, in religious identity.
How so?
Well, some believe the caliph had to be a direct family member of Muhammad, specifically his son-in-law Ali. These followers became known as the Shia Muslims. But others argued for the most qualified Muslim to be chosen by consensus. They backed Abu Bakr, Muhammad's close companion and father-in-law. They became known as the Sunni Muslims.
So, merit or consensus versus lineage?
Exactly, and this disagreement solidified into a permanent split. It created the two major branches within Islam that we still see today.
So, despite these internal divisions emerging pretty much right away, the Islamic Empire expanded with, well, incredible speed. Almost unbelievable looking back.
It really was astonishing. In less than a century after Muhammad's death, Islamic armies conquered vast territories across the Middle East, North Africa, all the way into the Iberian Peninsula of Spain.
What fueled that?
The concurrent weakness of the established empires bordering Arabia, the Byzantine Empire, the Sasanian Empire, and Persia. They were exhausted from fighting each other. And this rapid advance into Europe. It was famously halted in 732 CE, the Battle of Poitiers. And this battle is often seen as the significant boundary marker. It certainly helped define those geopolitical lines.
Okay, so after the initial expansion, we see dynasties forming.
Yes. The successors to those early caliphs established powerful, centralized dynasties. The first great Muslim dynasty was the Umayyads.
Based in Damascus.
Correct. Damascus in Syria became their capital. They expanded the empire even further, reaching the Indus Valley in India, parts of Central Asia. And they governed as a true monarchy, consolidating these vast territories, setting up a centralized administration.
But then there's a major shift, right? Around 750 CE.
A huge shift. The Abbasids took power, overthrowing the Umayyads, and they relocated the capital, moved it from Damascus to a newly founded city, Baghdad, in present-day Iraq.
And this wasn't just changing location.
No, it was much more than that. This relocation ushered in what we call the Golden Age of Islam. It's fascinating how changing the political center could ignite such a profound cultural and intellectual flourishing.
How did that happen? What changed?
The Abbasids shifted focus. Less emphasis on constant military expansion, more on scholarly pursuits, artistic endeavors, trade, administration. Baghdad became this incredible magnet, drawing scholars, artists, merchants from across the known world, became the intellectual heart of the empire. And our sources reveal clear points of contact, conflict, and exchange that shaped the entire medieval world. First, military encounters, obvious points of contact. The Battle of Poitiers in 732, as we said, marked a limit to major Islamic expansion into Western Europe, though Islamic rule flourished in Spain for centuries after. Then later, the Crusades.
Okay, so we've seen this incredible flourishing in the Islamic world. Now let's turn our attention westward to the parallel but often quite contrasting journey of Christianity during the same period.
A very different trajectory in many ways. Christianity's origins within the Roman Empire were, as most people know, marked by significant persecution.
Why were they persecuted so intensely?
Primarily because of its strict monotheism. Christians refused to participate in the imperial cult, the worship of the emperor.
Which made them look disloyal, traitorous even.
Exactly. To Roman authorities, this refusal seemed dangerously subversive, disloyal. It led to waves of brutal persecution, stories that became central to early Christian identity.
But then a dramatic change happens in the 4th century. Constantine.
Emperor Constantine the Great. a pivotal figure. First, he issued the Edict of Milan in 313 CE. This effectively ended state-sponsored persecution, granted Christians legal status and religious freedom.
A massive relief for the Christian community.
Huge. But then, even more significantly, Constantine himself converted to Christianity.
The emperor becomes a Christian.
Yes. Constantine's conversion and patronage were monumental. It transformed Christianity from a persecuted minority, often meeting in secret in catacombs, to a dominant, imperially backed state religion.
With all the resources and influence that entails.
Immense resources, political backing, access to the empire's vast administrative network. This dramatically accelerated its spread across the Roman world.
The Western Roman Empire collapses in 476 CE. What happens to Christianity then? Europe is changing rapidly.
It is. Europe is now populated by various Germanic tribes, Franks, Goths, Vandals, Saxons, and they followed their own diverse pagan gods, worshiping nature spirits, a completely different religious landscape.
So how does Christianity survive, let alone spread, in this new environment?
Through the persistent efforts of Christian missionaries, often monks, and crucially, through the conversion of powerful rulers. A key moment here is the baptism of Clovis, king of the Franks. Clovis wasn't just converting personally. It was a strategic political move that aligned his kingdom with the remaining Gallo-Roman elite and the powerful church. And it set a powerful precedent. It illustrates a very effective top-down conversion strategy that proved crucial in establishing Christianity across these new Germanic kingdoms.
So rulers converting brings their people along?
Often, yes. Frankish kings, for instance, actively supported missionaries like St. Amandus, who went into pagan areas. They often faced resistance, violence even, but royal backing and the perceived power of the new faith eventually led to success in many regions.
But was it always a clean break? Pagans just dropped their old ways and fully embraced Christianity overnight?
Rarely that simple. What we often see is a fascinating process of assimilation, or syncretism. Christian rituals and beliefs get adapted, blended with existing pagan customs and local traditions.
Creating something new, a kind of hybrid.
Exactly. Old pagan festivals might take on new Christian meanings. Christian saints might replace ancient gods in popular devotion or local shrines.
And even our weekdays
still echo those Germanic gods. Thursday from Thor, Wednesday from Woden or Odin. It shows this profound blending of cultures. Traditions are remarkably resilient. They adapt, take on new meanings, rather than being completely erased. Often happens right on our noses. We don't even think about it. Now, in this early medieval period, especially as Roman structures faded and you had this sometimes chaotic political landscape, monasteries played an absolutely vital role. Often understated, I think.
How so? What were they doing?
They were these self-contained communities, monks, nuns, living by strict rules, often deliberately setting up in remote areas, far from the turbulence of urban life or political centers.
Havens of stability.
Crucial centers of stability, prayer, and importantly, intellectual activity in a very turbulent period.
And the leaders, the abbots, they were powerful figures.
Yes. Abbots wielded considerable authority, not just spiritually within their community, but often economically and politically too. Monasteries accumulated vast amounts of land, managed huge estates, influenced local lords.
And they preserved knowledge, right? That's the classic image.
It's a crucial part of their legacy. Within their walls in scriptoria, monks meticulously copied ancient books by hand, especially Latin texts from Roman times. Classical authors like Virgil, Cicero, Livy, but also Christian texts, of course.
Painstaking work.
Incredibly painstaking. This process ensured the preservation of classical learning through centuries when literacy was scarce, and few other institutions were dedicated to preserving texts. Without them, so much of the foundation of Western thought would simply have vanished, irretrievably lost.
But they did more than just copy books.
Much more. Monasteries often ran the only hospitals or infirmaries available. They provided hospitality to travelers essential in a world with few inns. They aided the poor, draining swamps, clearing forests, improving farming techniques. They were really vital hubs for rural society.
Okay, but then things changed. By the 12th century, you mentioned new orders emerging. A reaction.
Yes, a definite reaction. By the 12th century, some of the older Benedictine monasteries had become incredibly wealthy, powerful landowners. Abbots lived like lords. This led to criticism.
So reform movements start.
Exactly. New monastic orders emerge. The Cistercians, for instance, founded in the late 11th century. They embraced a radical return to simplicity, hard manual labor. They deliberately built their monasteries in remote, uncultivated areas, swamps, forests, to embody their dedication to self-sufficiency and plain living. Back to basics, essentially.
And then there were the Franciscans. Very different again.
Very different. The mendicant orders, meaning begging orders like the Franciscans, founded by Francis of Assisi in the early 13th century, and also the Dominicans, they chose a radical life of poverty. But instead of withdrawing from the world like the Cistercians, they actively engaged with it, moving among the common people, especially in the growing cities and towns.
Bringing religion to the streets.
Precisely. Helping the poor, tending to the sick. It was a contrast to the often secluded, wealthy lives of the older monastic orders. A very different model of religious life.
So Christianity is spreading, evolving, reforming. But its path wasn't smooth internally, was it? You mentioned struggles, ruptures.
Far from smooth. One of the most significant lasting ruptures was the Great Schism of 1054 CE, a definitive break between the Eastern and Western churches.
Between Rome and Constantinople.
Exactly. At its heart was a deep disagreement over doctrine, but maybe even more fundamentally, it was about authority. The Pope in Rome claimed universal spiritual supremacy over all Christians. The Patriarch in Constantinople saw himself as the head of the Eastern Church, equal in standing, first among equals perhaps, and rejected the Pope's claims to ultimate binding authority over the East. Their mutual excommunication in 1054, basically kicking each other out of the church, solidified this divide. It formally created a Roman Catholic Church in the West and the Orthodox Church in the East.
A fundamental question about unity versus autonomy in religious authority.
Absolutely. What is the ultimate source of spiritual leadership in a diverse, geographically spread out faith? That question was answered differently in the East and West, and this rivalry, this mistrust, tragically intensified in 1204 during the Fourth Crusade.
The one that went wrong.
Spectacularly wrong. Crusaders, supposedly on a holy mission to recapture Jerusalem from Muslims, got diverted. Due to a complex mix of politics and debt, they ended up attacking and brutally sacking Constantinople.
A Christian city, the capital of the Byzantine Empire.
Yes, sacking a fellow Christian capital. It caused immense damage, destroyed countless priceless relics and works of art, massacred civilians, and it left incredibly deep, lasting tensions between Eastern and Western Christianity. A wound, some argue, that has never fully healed. Profound betrayal.
So internal conflict, but also major external conflict, the Crusades against the Muslim world.
Yes, the Crusades. A series of military campaigns that profoundly shaped the Middle Ages, starting around 1095 CE.
Initiated by Pope Urban II.
Correct. He issued this dramatic, fiery call for Christians to undertake an armed pilgrimage to liberate the Holy Land, specifically Jerusalem, from Muslim rule. He framed it as a holy war, a righteous cause, and crucially, promised remission of sins, forgiveness, and eternal salvation to those who participated. A powerful motivator.
But were the motives really purely religious?
The motives were incredibly complex. Well, Pope Urban likely saw it as a way to channel the violence of European knights outwards, rather than fighting each other, a way to enhance papal prestige and authority. For secular nobles, many saw opportunities for new lands, a chance to acquire wealth through plunder, increased status and influence back home. Younger sons who wouldn't inherit land in Europe saw a chance to carve out their own. And the First Crusade, launched after Urban's call, was surprisingly successful from a Western perspective. They captured Jerusalem in 1099 CE amidst a horrific massacre of the city's Muslim and Jewish inhabitants, and they established fragile crusader states.
But that wasn't the end of it.
Far from it. In 1187 CE, the brilliant Kurdish Muslim leader Saladin united Muslim forces and famously recaptured Jerusalem.
Which prompted more crusades.
Yes, several more major crusades followed over the next century or so, with varying degrees of failure, really. Ultimately, Christians lost permanent control over the Holy Land.
Now, you mentioned earlier how these events shaped perceptions of figures like Godfrey of Bouillon and Saladin very differently.
Yes, it's a perfect illustration of how history is written and remembered subjectively. In the West, Godfrey of Bouillon, a leader of the First Crusade, first ruler of the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem, was idealized for centuries. He even gets this prominent statue in Brussels, erected in 1848, tied into Belgian national pride.
Okay, the Western hero narrative.
That's right. Now, contrast that with the Arab world. Saladin, the unifier of Muslim forces, the recapturer of Jerusalem, known for his chivalry even by some Crusader sources, became and remains this powerful symbol of strength, honor, resistance against foreign invaders. There's a prominent statue of him in Damascus, inaugurated in 1993 by Hafez al-Assad, explicitly linking him to modern Arab unity and defiance.
Two completely different legacies from the same conflict.
Exactly. It vividly illustrates that concept standpoint dependency. Our view of history is profoundly shaped by our time, our place, our culture, our purpose. Schoolbooks, films, monuments. They consciously color the past to serve present narratives. They amplify certain aspects, downplay others, cultivate particular national or religious identities.
So we need to be critical of the narratives we receive.
Absolutely. Consider the Chronicles. The anonymous Gesta Francorum, written by a Crusader participant, depicts the brutal conquest of Jerusalem as a righteous, triumphalist victory. Purely Western viewpoint. Compare that to the Syrian chronicler Ibn al-Qalanisi. He offers a much briefer, more detached account from the Arab perspective, mentioning the burning of the synagogue during the conquest. These differing accounts highlight the need for multiple perspectives to even begin to understand what happened and the biases behind each narrative.
But despite all the conflict, the ideological differences, there's knowledge transfer, right? You mentioned words.
Significant knowledge transfer, yes.
Yeah.
It's often overlooked because the conflict narrative is so strong.
Yeah.
But during the Crusades, for instance, Europeans undoubtedly encountered and brought back medical knowledge, astronomical understanding, navigational techniques, architectural ideas from the generally more sophisticated Islamic worlds at that time. And the linguistic evidence is undeniable. So many words we use daily in English and other European languages have Arabic roots, often entering via trade or through translations made in Spain and Sicily.
Like algebra, alcohol?
Yeah. Algebra from al-Jab, alcohol from al-Kul, Ciphron zero from Zifr, Admiral from Amir al-Bahr, commander of the sea, magazine from Maksan, storehouse, lemon, orange, sugar, coffee, cotton. The list is long. It's a testament to the fact that even during periods of intense conflict, cultural exchange, borrowing, adaptation, it's rarely fully extinguished. Ideas travel, even across battle lines.
Okay, let's dive deeper into this Golden Age you mentioned. Roughly 750 to 1250 CE. This period sounds like it was truly remarkable for intellectual and cultural advancements.
Unparalleled, really, for its time and place. It profoundly influenced global knowledge, especially in fields like science, medicine, mathematics, philosophy. The list goes on.
And cities like Baghdad, Cordoba, Cairo were the hubs.
Magnets drawing scholars and thinkers from incredibly diverse backgrounds, Arab, Persian, Jewish, Christian. They all converged in these dynamic urban centers. But the most renowned institution was undoubtedly the House of Wisdom in Baghdad.
What exactly was it? A library? A university?
It was all of those and more. An unparalleled academic center, a massive library, and crucially, a translation institute on an industrial scale for the time. Here, scholars meticulously translated foundational texts from ancient Greeks, Aristotle, Plato, Euclid, Galen Romans, Persians, Indians, translating them into Arabic.
Just preserving them. Or doing more.
Much more than just preserving. This commitment to translation was foundational, yes, but it allowed them to critically engage with this knowledge, to build upon the wisdom of the past, integrate it with their own original discoveries and insights. Remember that quote from Al-Kindi. We must not be ashamed to admire or acquire truth from wherever it comes.
Even if it comes from long-lost nations and foreign peoples.
Exactly. That philosophy of open inquiry, embracing knowledge regardless of its origin, that was truly remarkable. It set the stage for these profound advancements.
Yeah.
They weren't just passive receivers, they were synthesizing, critiquing, advancing knowledge.
So what were some of the major contributions? You mentioned math, medicine.
Huge contributions. In mathematics, the crucial adoption and widespread dissemination of the number zero, the concept, came from India and the decimal system.
Which we still use today, obviously.
Absolutely. Popularized and further developed by scholars like Al-Khwarizmi, his work gave us the very term algebra. These innovations revolutionized calculation, paving the way for modern mathematics. It's hard to overstate their importance. Groundbreaking work. Physicians like Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, meticulously studied diseases' treatments. His canon of medicine was the standard medical textbook in Europe for centuries. Surgical procedures, developed pharmacology. This laid the groundwork for advancements that, centuries later, would transform European medical practice.
What about philosophy?
Meticulously studied and developed Aristotle's ideas. They sought to reconcile Greek philosophy with Islamic theology, and their commentaries on Aristotle profoundly influenced medieval European scholasticism. Thinkers like Thomas Aquinas. It reminds us there wasn't this intellectual void between the classical world and the Renaissance. Islamic scholars were the crucial bridge.
And literature. I think most people know 1001 Nights.
Arabian Nights, yes. A fantastic testament to the richness and diversity of Islamic culture during this period. It's this incredible collection captivating tales of travel, adventure, love, magic, wisdom. It wasn't just entertainment, though. Often conveyed moral lessons, showcased the vibrant urban life of cities like Baghdad, gave a window into diverse customs and beliefs.
And it had a huge influence beyond the Islamic world.
Immense influence on later European literature, capturing imaginations everywhere. It exemplifies a really rich storytelling tradition. Now, contrast that, to some extent, with the role of European monasteries. Vital for preserving knowledge, absolutely meticulously copying Latin texts, but often more inward-focused. Think of someone like Bernard of Clairvaux, a hugely influential 12th century Cistercian abbot. He famously questioned the value of studying secular philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, preferring scripture and apostolic teachings. It suggests a more selective, perhaps defensive, approach to non-religious wisdom in parts of Christian Europe compared to the intellectual climate in Baghdad at its peak.
Different attitudes towards knowledge from outside.
Different priorities, different contexts, perhaps.
But even as Baghdad flourishes, the empire itself starts to fragment.
Yes, politically at least. This period also saw the rise of new, independent Islamic centers. In Spain, for example, exiled Umayyad survivors of the Abbasid takeover eventually founded their own caliphate, the Caliphate of Cordoba, in 929 CE.
And Cordoba became a major center in its own right.
Absolutely. A beacon of culture and knowledge in Europe. And at the same time, in Egypt, the Fatimid Empire emerged. Cairo became their capital. So they acted as a counterweight to the largely Sunni Abbasids in Baghdad, provided an alternative center of power, of religious authority, especially for the Shia community.
So, multiple centers of power, multiple cultural hubs, but the overall political unity is weakening.
Particularly around the year 1000 CE. It was gradual. The caliphate's central control weakened. Local dynasties, governors, military commanders gained more and more autonomy. And then new groups emerged, like the Seljuks from Central Asia. They rose to power, eventually conquering Baghdad itself in 1055 CE.
Did they abolish the caliphate?
No, interestingly, they left the Abbasid caliph in place as a religious leader, a symbolic figurehead. But the real political and military power, that now lay with the sultans.
A separation of religious and political authority in practice.
Pretty much. And this process, this pattern of central authority weakening, regional powers rising, it foreshadows similar shifts in other empires throughout history.
And the final blow to the Abbasids in Baghdad.
That came later, in 1258. The Mongol armies conquered and utterly destroyed Baghdad, a devastating event that effectively ended the Abbasid Caliphate as a political entity.
But the cultural legacy lived on.
Absolutely. Even though the political empire fractured into smaller kingdoms, sultanates, dynasties. The cultural and religious legacy of Islam, its intellectual achievements, continue to thrive and spread for centuries, transcending those political boundaries.
Okay, let's shift focus again, back to Europe, but looking more closely at political power itself. How was society structured? Who held the power in the Middle Ages?
It's a fascinating picture, and again, more complex than the simple image of all-powerful kings.
So not just kings and emperors calling all the shots.
On the surface, maybe it looks like that sometimes. But when you dig deeper into how society actually worked, how governance functioned, you find a much more decentralized reality. Local lords, powerful bishops and abbots, the rising townspeople in cities, even skilled artisans organized in guilds. they all gained increasing influence, reshaping the political landscape.
So power was much more distributed, more contested.
Very much so. A shifting mosaic of authority, not a neat pyramid always pointing to the king.
Charlemagne is a good example to start with, right? He ruled a huge empire.
A prime example of trying to manage this complexity. Crowned emperor in 800 CE, ruled this vast territory, modern France, Germany, parts of Italy, and more. In practice, these local lords, the counts, the dukes, even just local castle lords,
Becoming mini-kings in their own lands.
pretty much. They collected their own local taxes, administered justice in their own courts, sometimes minted their own coins, raised their own local armies. They often behaved like independent rulers, becoming formidable power centers that could, and often did, challenge royal authority.
And this tendency got worse after Charlemagne.
Definitely. After his death in 814, his empire fragmented quickly. The Treaty of Verdun in 843 formally split it into 3 parts among his grandsons, laying the groundwork for what would become France and Germany. And subsequent kings were often weaker. They gradually lost effective control over their powerful vassals, who acted more and more independently, recognizing the king's authority in name only, maybe.
Was there a specific moment that accelerated this fragmentation?
A really significant moment was in 877 CE. Charles the Bald, one of those later Frankish kings, made fiefs hereditary.
Meaning the land and title automatically passed from father to son.
Exactly. Before, the king could theoretically reclaim the fief upon a vassal's death. Now, it became family property. This massively strengthened the local nobility, made their power permanent, and further diminished the king's direct control. It really cemented that decentralized nature of power. Even groups like the Vikings, initially just fearsome raiders plundering coasts and rivers, were eventually integrated. A famous example is in 911 CE. The Viking leader Rollo was granted the Duchy of Normandy as a fief by the French king, Charles the Simple.
Giving land to the raiders seems counterintuitive.
Strategic move. It transformed Rollo and his Vikings from terrifying raiders into loyal vassals of the French crown. They settled down, converted to Christianity, and their territory, Normandy, actually became a buffer, protecting the French kingdom from further Viking incursions.
So turning a threat into an asset shows the flexibility of the system.
Exactly. The feudal system could adapt, incorporate new elements, even civilize potential threats by bringing them into the structure of loyalty and landholding. And interestingly, it often mirrors the fragmentation and rise of independent centers we observed in the Islamic world after the initial unity under the early Abbasids. It suggests a recurring historical pattern: empires consolidate, then face pressures towards decentralization, regional powers rise. It happens again and again.
So kings are losing power to hereditary nobles. Did anyone try to push back?
Yes, rulers tried different strategies.
Otto using bishops.
He learned from the Frankish fragmentation. He came up with an ingenious approach to reassert central control. He strategically appointed bishops and abbots as administrators for vast territories within his empire.
Using churchmen instead of nobles? Why?
Because bishops and abbots were, officially at least, celibate. They couldn't have legitimate heirs to inherit their position or the lands they controlled for the church.
Ah, so when they died, the power and land reverted back to the emperor.
Precisely. It prevented the long-term fragmentation caused by hereditary fiefs. It was a brilliant, pragmatic strategy to maintain a measure of royal control by using the church's structure.
You also mentioned that sometimes new power centers arose from personal events. Flanders, for instance.
Right, the county of Flanders. Its origins are tied to a rather dramatic story. Judith, the daughter of King Charles the Bald, eloped with Baldwin I, a powerful count. A major scandal at the time. Her father was furious, initially punished them. But eventually, needing a strong figure to defend his northern border against Vikings, he acknowledged Baldwin as the first Count of Flanders. So, this personal drama leads to the founding of a major political entity. And Flanders grew incredibly wealthy. It had thriving port cities like Bruges and Ghent. It developed a massive cloth industry, producing high-quality wool textiles. And it had crucial trade links with England, which supplied the best raw wool.
So industry and trade fuel its power.
Immensely. And this wealth, in turn, fueled a demand for autonomy.
From the French king.
Yes. These powerful Flemish cities, Bruges, Ghent, Ypres, their rich merchant classes, their craft guilds, they demanded and gradually gained significant city rights, or charters. These charters granted them privileges like self-governance through city councils, their own legal systems, the right to build protective city walls, economic freedom.
Empowering the cities themselves.
Hugely. It demonstrated the rising power of urban centers, of townspeople, of merchants, directly challenging the traditional feudal authority. It's fascinating how personal events, economic booms, urban growth could shape these huge historical developments, creating powerful, self-governing regions. Power wasn't just flowing top-down from kings, it was surging upwards from these dynamic economic hubs too.
Okay, so we see fragmentation, local power growing, but at the same time, some rulers are trying to centralize to consolidate power, right? Like in England after 1066.
Absolutely. The Battle of Hastings in 1066 is a major turning point for England. William, Duke of Normandy, descendant of those Vikings we just mentioned, conquers England.
William the Conqueror.
The very same. His conquest fundamentally reshaped England's political landscape. He brought French language, customs, a much more organized feudal system than what existed in Anglo-Saxon England. And to assert his control, suppress rebellions, he built castles everywhere, visible symbols of Norman power. But maybe his most significant act for centralization was initiating the Domesday Book, completed in 1086, just 20 years after the conquest. It was this exhaustive, incredibly detailed survey and register of all land and possessions in England.
Everything.
Pretty much everything of value. Every manor, every village who owned it, how much land, how many peasants, plow teams, mills, fisheries, even down to individual cows and pigs in some entries.
The detail sounds incredible for the time. Why do it?
It allowed William and his administration to know exactly what resources the kingdom had, who held what land. It gave the king an unprecedented level of administrative control and knowledge about his realm.
A tool for centralization.
A remarkable tool, nothing quite like it existed elsewhere in Europe at the time. It laid the groundwork for a much stronger, more centralized English monarchy compared to, say, France or Germany at that point.
Speaking of Germany, you mentioned Otto using bishops, but later there's this huge conflict between the emperor and the pope, the investiture controversy.
Yes, a major struggle erupts later, mainly in the 11th and early 12th centuries, the investiture controversy.
What was it about? Investing?
But it was really about who had the authority to appoint bishops in the first place, the Holy Roman Emperor or the Pope in Rome.
Why did both sides care so much about appointing bishops?
Because bishops weren't just spiritual leaders. They were often incredibly wealthy landowners, controlling vast territories, castles, even armies. They were major political figures, so controlling their appointment meant controlling huge resources, influence, and loyalty.
So it's a power struggle between church and state.
A classic defining power struggle of the Middle Ages. Who held ultimate authority, spiritual or temporal? The Pope or the Emperor? You get documents like the Dictatus Papae from Pope Gregory VII around 1075, boldly claiming the Pope had the right to depose emperors, to release subjects from loyalty to rulers, and absolutely control bishop appointments, asserting papal supremacy in the strongest possible terms.
High stakes. How did it end?
After decades of conflict, emperors being excommunicated, popes being driven out, it ended in a compromise. The Concordat of Worms in 1122. They basically split the difference. They distinguished between the spiritual investiture, giving the bishop his ring and staff, symbolizing spiritual authority which the church would handle, and the secular investiture, granting the bishop his lands and civil authority which the emperor would handle.
So a separation of powers, sort of.
A recognition of both spheres. It was seen as a partial victory for the church, asserting its spiritual independence. But it also acknowledged the emperor's crucial role The underlying tension between papal and imperial power wasn't fully resolved, though. That struggle would continue in different forms for centuries.
Okay, what about France? We saw fragmentation after Charlemagne. Did French kings manage to centralize later?
They did, but it was a long, slow, patient process. The Capetian dynasty, starting with Hugh Capet in 987 CE, began this effort. Initially, their actual royal control was tiny, just a small area around Paris, the Ile-de-France. They were weaker than some of their own great vassals, like the Duke of Normandy or Aquitaine.
So how did they gain power?
Gradually, through strategic marriages, shrewd diplomacy, playing vassals off against each other, and persistent military effort over generations, they slowly expanded the royal domain bit by bit. A really key figure was Philip II Augustus, reigned from 1180 to 1223. He systematically worked to centralize the administration. He established royal officials called baillis in the north, seneschaux in the south, to govern local areas directly for the crown, bypassing local nobles to some extent. He collected royal taxes more effectively, and he skillfully weakened the power of the great nobility, often through war, ensuring their loyalty was primarily to the crown.
And this leads to a major confrontation.
It culminates in the Battle of Bouvines in 1214, a pivotal moment. Philip Augustus decisively defeated a powerful coalition arrayed against him, led by the English king John Lackland, the German Emperor Otto V, and some rebellious French nobles.
A huge victory for France.
Monumental. It significantly strengthened the French monarch's position, secured vast new territories for the crown, like Normandy, lost by King John, solidified centralized power, and really established France as the leading power in Western Europe.
So France centralizing under a strong king, but King John of England, who lost at Bouvines, things went differently for him back home.
Very differently. His military defeats in France, losing those ancestral lands, severely weakened his position. This, combined with his unpopular rule and heavy taxation to pay for his failed wars, led to a major rebellion by his barons.
And the result was Magna Carta.
Exactly. In 1215, the rebellious barons forced King John to sign Magna Carta, the Great Charter.
What did it actually do?
Crucially, it limited the king's power. It established that the king was not above the law. It granted specific rights and liberties to the nobles, the church, and eventually interpreted to apply to all free men of the kingdom. Things like protection from illegal imprisonment, access to swift justice, limitations on feudal payments.
It's a huge deal for the time.
Absolutely. A crucial early step towards parliamentary government. It laid the groundwork for the principle that even the monarch is subject to the law. Quite revolutionary for its time, and a stark contrast to the path towards royal absolutism emerging in France. Now, we talked about cities gaining autonomy, especially in places like Flanders. This growing power sometimes led to direct confrontation with rulers trying to assert central control.
Like in Flanders itself, you mentioned Bruges.
Yes. A famous example is in 1302, the French king Philip IV, known as Philip the Fair, the grandson of the saintly Louis IX, was determined to incorporate wealthy Flanders more firmly into his kingdom. He wanted its tax revenues.
But the Flemish cities resisted.
Strongly. Tensions boiled over in Bruges with the event known as the Bruges Matins. The citizens of Bruges, led by figures like the weaver Peter de Conick and the butcher John Bridel, rose up and violently attacked the French garrison stationed in their city, massacring many of them.
A full-blown uprising.
Definitely. And it led directly to a major battle shortly after. The Battle of the Golden Spurs, fought near Kortrijk, also in 1302.
And this is the famous battle where foot soldiers beat knights.
That's the one. Flemish foot soldiers, mainly urban militia from the cities, craftsmen armed with pikes and those characteristic Godendags, a sort of heavy mace-spear combo, faced a large army of elite French knights.
And the Flemish won.
They won a stunning victory. The French cavalry got bogged down and were cut down by the disciplined Flemish infantry. Hundreds of golden spurs were supposedly collected from the fallen French knights as trophies, hence the name. But here's where it gets really interesting, connecting back to that idea of historical memory.
How it's used later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This battle, a medieval victory of commoners over aristocracy, became a hugely powerful symbol of Flemish pride and resistance, especially against French influence. But its significance was massively amplified centuries later, particularly in the 19th century during the rise of Belgian nationalism and the Flemish movement. Hendrik Conscience's historical novel, The Lion of Flanders, published in 1838, was incredibly popular. It turned the battle into this epic tale of national liberation. It clearly illustrates how historical events get repurposed, romanticized, used as potent tools for propaganda, shaping national identity, influencing public sentiment long after the fact, often simplifying a complex reality into a heroic narrative for a present-day cause.
Okay, so urban resistance. But then there's an even bigger conflict brewing between France and England.
Yes, on a much larger scale. The death of the French king in 1328 without a direct male heir ignited the Hundred Years' War.
Which lasted more than 100 years, ironically.
It did, on and off, from 1337 to 1453, a monumental conflict primarily between the ruling dynasties of France and England.
What was the fundamental issue?
At its core, it was about royal succession. King Edward III of England had a plausible claim to the French throne through his mother, who was Charles V's sister. The French nobility rejected his claim, preferring a French cousin, Philip VI, founding the Valois dynasty. But it was also deeply intertwined with long-standing territorial disputes, control over valuable French lands like Aquitaine or Gascony, which the English kings held as vassals of the French king, and control or influence over Flanders with its crucial wool trade. It led to the development of more permanent standing armies, innovations in military technology like the English longbow, which dominated early battles like Crécy and Agincourt.
And during this long period of war, another power emerges, the Burgundians.
Yes, a fascinating development. The Dukes of Burgundy, originally just powerful French nobles related to the French royal family. But through shrewd marriages, inheritance, diplomacy, and conquest, figures like Philip the Bold, John the Fearless, and especially Philip the Good, managed to assemble an incredible collection of territories.
Where were these territories?
They held their ancestral Duchy of Burgundy in France, but crucially, they also came to rule most of the Netherlands, modern-day Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, plus parts of northern France. They created this powerful block of lands right between France and the Holy Roman Empire.
Functioning almost as an independent state.
Pretty much. Despite nominally being vassals of both the French king and the German emperor for different parts of their lands, they acted with increasing independence. They built a sophisticated court renowned for its culture and patronage of the arts. Think Jan van Eyck. They had a powerful military, creating a cultural and economic powerhouse that rivaled kingdoms.
And they used culture as a tool of power.
Masterfully. They used art, lavish feasts, ceremonies, all as sophisticated propaganda to project their authority, legitimize their rule, and display their immense wealth and prestige, all designed to demonstrate their power and cultivate loyalty.
And the last powerful duke, Charles the Bold, he tried to make it official. Become a king.
He did. Charles the Bold, Philip the Good's son, was incredibly ambitious. He spent his reign fighting wars to try and consolidate his territories, and crucially, to gain a royal crown.
Did he succeed?
He came close, but ultimately failed. His aggressive policies made him many enemies. He died in battle against the Swiss at Nancy in 1477 without a male heir.
So what happened to the Burgundian state?
His daughter and sole heir, Mary of Burgundy, inherited his vast lands. To protect herself from French annexation, she quickly married Maximilian of Austria from the rising Habsburg dynasty. This single marriage dramatically shifted the balance of power in Europe. It brought the incredibly rich and strategically vital Burgundian territories, especially the wealthy Netherlands, into the sprawling Habsburg Empire.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. We've explored the rise and golden age of Islam, the spread and evolution of Christianity in the West, the shifting power dynamics in Europe, distinct threads, but happening simultaneously.
That's the crucial step, isn't it? Connecting the threads. Now, if we zoom out even further, take a truly global snapshot around, say, the 9th or 10th century, we can briefly compare the different approaches to organizing society in these major civilizations. Think about the Islamic world under the Abbasids, Frankish Europe under Charlemagne or his successors, the Byzantine Empire centered on Constantinople, and even Tang Dynasty China, which was experiencing its own golden age simultaneously.
4 major centers of power and culture. How did they compare in terms of governance, for example?
Very different models. In the Islamic world, you had the Caliph, at least initially, as this combined religious and political head. Though, as we saw, that unity fractured, leading to separate political rulers, sultans, emirs, and the Caliph, retaining more symbolic religious authority in places like Baghdad. In Frankish Europe, you had kings and emperors, whose worldly power was deeply intertwined with, but also often challenged by, the Church and the Pope. That whole investiture controversy highlights the tension, power sharing or power struggle between secular and religious authority.
And Byzantium.
The Byzantine emperor maintained a much more absolute form of rule. He was head of state and effectively head of the church in his realm, a system sometimes called Caesaro-Papism. Highly centralized control emanating from Constantinople.
And China under the Tang Dynasty.
A completely different model again. The emperor held divine legitimacy as the Son of Heaven. Officials were selected based on rigorous imperial examinations, testing their knowledge of Confucian classics. A highly organized administrative state, quite distinct from European feudalism or the caliphate structure.
What about their economies?
Also varied wildly. The Islamic world, especially in its golden age, had Baghdad, Cordoba, Cairo, huge wealth generated through extensive land and sea trade networks spanning continents, advanced agriculture, sophisticated banking and taxation systems supporting urban life and scholarship. Frankish Europe, particularly early on, was much more agrarian, decentralized, relied heavily on self-sufficient agricultural manners under feudalism. Long-distance trade was more limited, though it grew later. A vibrant urban economy in Constantinople, significant crafts, industries, silk production, stolen from China, and a well-organized state treasury and stable gold currency for a long time.
And Tang China.
Immense agricultural production, supported by innovations like new rice strains, advanced irrigation, and of course the vital Silk Road trade routes, connecting China overland to Central Asia, India, Persia, even the Mediterranean. Massive cities like Chang'an, modern Shan, were huge economic hubs, incredibly cosmopolitan centers.
And their approaches to knowledge, we touched on this.
Stark differences again. That open-minded, synthesizing approach of the Islamic House of Wisdom, actively seeking and translating knowledge from diverse traditions. Contrasted with European monasteries, more focused on preserving existing Latin, Christian, and classical texts, perhaps more cautious about integrating pagan or external philosophy. Tang China had its own profound philosophical traditions, Confucianism, Taoism, the growing influence of Buddhism. But it also showed considerable openness to other cultures via the Silk Road, absorbing Indian Buddhism, integrating foreign ideas, technologies, artistic styles.
It really raises questions about what drives innovation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What factors lead some societies to embrace external knowledge more readily than others? Comparing these civilizations highlights that there isn't just one path to cultural or scientific advancement.
So we've traced these complex dynamics, the rise and fall of empires, the spread of religions, the clashes and exchanges. What does it all mean for us today? Looking back from the 21st century, what's the enduring legacy? How does this take us from opinion to insight?
The legacy is immense, and it continues to influence global interactions, perceptions, even ongoing conflicts. This isn't just dusty, irrelevant history, it's the bedrock for understanding so much of our present world. And one of the most crucial takeaways, I think, is recognizing that the way history is told, the way it's remembered, is never neutral. It's always shaped by contemporary agendas, perspectives, needs. These examples powerfully highlight how history can be, and often is, wielded as a tool. For political purposes, for nationalistic mobilization, for shaping collective memory and identity to serve present narratives.
Sometimes for positive cohesion, maybe, but sometimes for division.
Unfortunately, yes. Be aware of the potential biases. Be open to perspectives that challenge our own assumptions. This helps us avoid those simplistic, dangerous, us versus them narratives that history is so often reduced to. And that nuanced understanding, that insight, is incredibly valuable for navigating the global challenges, the cultural encounters we face today. It helps us see the deep roots of our modern world.
Moving beyond simple opinions to find deeper insight from the past. That's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the Middle Ages.
Yeah.